Hello and welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Andy, and we're here on location at the West Point Museum, the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, for Unseen History, which is our opportunity to go to a museum and let them pull stuff out of the vault we wouldn't normally get to see. I'm here with Mike Diaz, who's the Curator of History and Uniforms. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for giving us a chance to spotlight this piece.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. And what are we looking at and what's its story?
Sure. So this is the cadet dress coat of Tully McCrae, who graduates in 1862. What makes him interesting is that he's born and comes to the academy from Natchez, Mississippi. So he's a Southerner, comes to West Point, and stays with the Federal Army.
It's interesting you say that. I think about the Southerners who stayed in the Union Army. You know, I think about either Thomas or John Gibbon or even someone like Grimes Davis from Mississippi who are older, more established officers. Like, he had to be, 20, 21 when the war breaks out, but he decided to stay in the federal service.
Certainly. Not only is he not as established as George Thomas, but comes of age entirely in a very sectional, very polarized time. So I think would have been easy for him to go the way a lot of his classmates did and head south at the start of the war.
So before we go on and tell the rest of his story, let's talk about the artifact itself. What's unusual about this coat, or what brings it to your attention?
Probably the thing that's most unusual about it is its phenomenal condition. So the family kept this in a cedar chest that had belonged to McCrae at the end of his Army career. And I think just keeping it in a good climate, cedar is a great material for preservation because bugs and stuff can't, for the most part, eat through it. So when they sent us pictures of this, we at first didn't believe them that this was actually something from the Civil War. Then once we got a closer look at it, we realized that this is the genuine article. So this looks like the day that he took it off. There's some interesting details to it. I think my favorite is this leather reinforce here, kind of right on the waist of the coat, right where maybe if you're hitting your studies are taking up more of your time than physical fitness first year, might need a little help just making sure that coat stays right where it needs to be.
Well, I think of the cut of the coat stem, that swallow chest, the very narrow waist. Imagine it puts a lot of pressure on those buttons down there.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. This coat is in fantastic condition. There's just no marks on it. It looks like you could wear it on parade today if you were that size. What does the insignia on it indicate?
So West Point has its own ranking system. It's one of the few places that you'll see folks in officer positions with denoted by chevrons.
Yeah.
So this is a cadet lieutenant.
What would a cadet lieutenant be doing what was his role in the academy?
So the Corps of Cadets is broken down into at this point 2 regiments, and with all the companies and platoons descending from there, and that's a way for all the officer positions in these units are staffed by cadets. So this is a way for them to get some command experience, some administrative experience before going off to the Army.
So this would have been something you saw for your senior or your junior, senior years kind of positions, right? Okay. This coat, I really love the detail on it. The piping is immaculate. How different is this coat from the coat we would see today if we went out to the parade ground and saw the West Point cadets in their equivalent coat?
Sure. So I think the chevrons have changed a little bit. There's 4 regiments now, so there's some these actually get a little bit bigger and more elaborate, and how they're applied changes. But really, the look of the coat has not changed a whole lot from when it's first adopted in 1815. So it's a wartime measure during the War of 1812 that the Army buys up all the blue wool, and so they have to switch over to gray. And they realize, that looks pretty good. It's cheaper, so it improves morale a little bit for the cadets. And starting in 1816, they decide to go with this as the permanent coat. And again, minor changes to cut and configuration, minor changes to the decorations, but it's pretty much the same uniform.
So McCrae graduates from here in the midst of the Civil War, right? And presumably he goes off and fights in the war, right?
Right. So goes to the U.S. Army, so not a volunteer regiment, but the Army of the United States, serves with I Battery, 1st U.S. Artillery, and is in that position as the deputy battery commander at the Battle of Gettysburg, where his commanding officer, George Woodruff, is killed. The commander of the next battery over, Alonzo Cushing, both those gentlemen, West Point class of 1861, they're killed or mortally wounded during the fight, And so McCrae takes command of the combined battery during the fighting.
Both of them had taken such devastating losses during the battle, they combined them for a while.
Right. As the guy that kind of took command of these batteries during the battle, expected to be promoted to captain and named
Sure.
their permanent commander afterwards, and was, by all accounts, a little surprised when that didn't happen, that they brought in another officer to take command of the batteries. So he then transferred to the Department of the South and heads down to Florida, and in 1864 is wounded in the leg at the Battle of Olustee. And we have the bullet that was pulled out of his leg and the bandage that they used to wrap it up on display downstairs. So then he returns to West Point to teach mathematics here as a convalescent assignment. And he's here through 1866, healing up.
You know, it's interesting. He graduates, and 3 years later, he's back here as an instructor already. But I think it goes to that thing, another thing of the role of the academy didn't stop because of the war. You know, they're still instructing, they're still making officers. The regular army is going to continue.
Right.
You know, I think it's easy to think like, oh, the war came on, there's an emergency, we'll just get officers from other places. You know, this place continues doing its job.
Absolutely, right. And, this is an army that is interested in learning, taking those lessons from the battlefield, right? Many of the instructors here during the latter years of the Civil War are, graduates from, the wartime or 5-10 years earlier that come back around and are teaching and have, gained battlefield experience, are conveying that to the cadets that are then going to go out and fight. And that remains true, throughout the Academy's history. Many of our instructors now are veterans of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, teaching what they learned to modern cadets.
It's funny as a connection. I remember reading We Were Soldiers Once and Young by Lieutenant General Hal Moore. Yep. And I remember he talked about his time as an instructor here at West Point and how he was relating the lessons he learned from the Korean War to the cadets and, preparing them for what eventually be service in Vietnam. It's interesting to see that repeating theme throughout the Academy's history.
Yeah, what West Point can be insular at times, but it does pay off. There are some reasons for it.
Absolutely. What is the rest of McCrae's life like? We talked to him, he's here as an instructor. What happens to him after his time here?
So goes on to command a number of posts and garrisons out west. Eventually heads out to the Philippines, and that's where he really ends his military career. That's his last, his last deployment, and then comes back and retires at the Presidio in San Francisco in 1902. And at that time is the longest serving officer in the Army.
Oh, wow.
And then he's buried here along with his daughter and son-in-law, who's also a West Point graduate.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you for having us here. Thank you for sharing this with us. This is just a tremendous artifact.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece. We got it in fairly recently. Hasn't made it out to the floor yet, but we're glad to show it off.
I mean, almost pristine. Yeah. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning about Tully McCrae, and you can have a better idea of the conflict for Southerners that stayed loyal to the Union and chose not to go with their states and their families and how difficult that had to be. You might not get to see this artifact if you come here to West Point, but you do get to see the bullet and the bandage that we talked about. We get to see Lieutenant Woodruff, the commander of Battery I at Gettysburg, who died. You can see his revolver. There's these items on display that you can make a connection to. Otherwise, this museum has a tremendous amount of artifacts that you will love. I can't encourage you to come here enough. This is an outstanding place. For Civil War Digital Digest, I'm Andy, and we'll catch you next time.